1 minute ago, Camilla left stunned as Charles announces William's immediate rise to power. Today I am proud to create him Prince of Wales. The room did not erupt when King Charles delivered the announcement. It became unnaturally still. Camilla's expression froze. William lowered his eyes, and every advisor understood that the balance of royal power had just shifted. With one carefully prepared declaration, Charles placed his eldest son at the center of the monarchy's daily command and left his wife facing a future she had never believed would arrive so suddenly. Did you really think the royal family was going to coast through this year without a complete seismic collapse behind palace walls? Think again. Because right now Buckingham Palace is in absolute turmoil, and the reign of King Charles III just took the most dramatic, jaw-dropping turn in modern history. What actually happens when a king decides he can no longer bear the crushing weight of the crown alone? What happens when decades of carefully orchestrated palace politics are shattered in a single, devastating heartbeat? Today we are diving deep into the absolute chaos tearing through the royal household. We're talking about locked-door confrontations, hidden documents, secret alliances, and the moment Queen Camilla realized her influence was systematically wiped out overnight. Was this a desperate act of preservation by a tired monarch? Or was it a cold, calculated move by Prince William to secure the future of the realm before it was too late? Grab your tea, hit that subscribe button, and brace yourselves, because we are breaking down the ultimate royal showdown that the palace desperately tried to keep hidden. The sudden silence inside the council room was not just an awkward pause. It was the sound of an entire era crashing down around Queen Camilla's ears. For months, rumor mills and palace insiders had been whispering about tension, but no one expected Charles to pull the trigger so decisively, so publicly, and with such cold precision. To understand how we arrived at this absolute turning point, you have to look at the escalating mess that has defined the palace over the past year. Charles's health struggles were supposed to be managed quietly behind closed doors, with a carefully curated image of unity projected to the public. Instead, what we got was a chaotic free-for-all where competing factions inside the royal household were firing off conflicting orders, leaving staff, diplomats, and senior advisors completely bewildered about who was actually calling the shots. At the very center of this storm was Queen Camilla, who had spent decades clawing her way from the most disliked woman in Britain to the crowned consort beside the king. She had built a formidable circle of influence, leveraging her private access to Charles to dictate schedules, manage public appearances, and slowly steer senior appointments toward her preferred loyalists. But power in the palace is a fragile illusion, especially when you are operating on borrowed authority. Rumors had been swirling for months that Camilla's office was increasingly acting as a shadow command center, countermanding decisions made by Prince William's team, and even bypassing standard state protocols to prioritize her own public engagements. Staff members were reportedly caught in a nightmare scenario, receiving one set of orders from the king's household, another from Camilla's private secretary, and a completely contradictory set of instructions from Kensington Palace. The breaking point arrived during a high-stakes planning session for an upcoming international summit. While Charles was recovering from grueling medical treatments, Camilla's team allegedly attempted to reshuffle the entire diplomatic schedule, cutting down William's planned keynotes to expand her own profile on the global stage. It was a classic move of palace maneuvering, designed to consolidate her standing as the indispensable power behind the throne. But what Camilla failed to realize was that Prince William was no longer willing to play the patient heir waiting politely in the wings. William had been watching the operational decay of the monarchy with growing alarm, recognizing that a house divided against itself cannot survive the intense scrutiny of the modern media age. According to deep-level leaks from senior household staff, William took his concerns directly to Princess Anne, the one person inside the royal family whose ruthless devotion to institutional discipline rivals anyone in modern history, and had been monitoring the situation with a cold, analytical eye. She saw the confusion, the overlapping mandates, and the dangerous perception that the crown was being managed through personal favor rather than strict constitutional duty. Together, William and Anne laid out a devastating dossier for the king. It detailed delayed state papers, conflicting public statements, and the growing frustration among government liaisons who simply didn't know whose authority held weight anymore. When Charles sat down to review those files late into the night, he was forced to confront a brutal reality. The romantic notion that he could rule with his wife as a joint partnership was actively destroying the administrative machinery of the monarchy. The king was exhausted, his physical strength sapped by his ongoing treatments, and the daily strain of mediating between his wife's ambition and his son's insistence on reform had become unbearable. Charles realized that if he did not establish a single, undeniable chain of command immediately, his legacy would be defined not by his lifelong preparation for the throne, but by the chaotic collapse of his own household. The decision was made in total secrecy. While Camilla believed she had secured her position by surrounding the king with her closest confidants, Charles was quietly authorizing a legal and operational framework that would strip those exact networks of their power. Princess Anne oversaw the drafting of the documents, ensuring every loophole was closed and every line of authority was clearly delineated. Catherine was brought into the loop to ensure that the transition of public priorities would be seamless, leaving Camilla entirely isolated, completely oblivious to the fact that the floor was about to drop out from beneath her feet. When the day of the announcement arrived, the trap was fully sprung. Charles summoned the senior family members and top advisors to a private briefing under the guise of a routine update on household restructuring. Camilla walked into that room expecting a minor discussion about budget allocations and staff reassignments. She took her seat beside the king, confident, composed, and ready to assert her usual dominance over the proceedings. But as Charles placed his hands on the table and picked up the red folder, the energy in the room shifted instantly. The king did not falter, nor did he offer a soft prelude to soften the blow. He looked directly at the assembled advisors and declared that, effective immediately, Prince William was assuming full operational authority over the daily management of the royal household, the coordination of royal offices, and the strategic direction of the crown's public priorities. The words hung in the air like a heavy curtain falling over the room. Camilla's smile vanished instantly, her posture stiffening into a rigid, icy shock as she looked from her husband to Prince William, who sat across the table with a somber, unyielding expression. The absolute stillness in that room was terrifying. Every advisor present knew precisely what those words meant. This was not a routine delegation of chores or a temporary arrangement while the king rested. Operational authority meant that William now held the power to approve or reject any schedule, any budget, and any public initiative across all royal households, including Camilla's own office. With a single sentence, Charles had severed his wife's access to the levers of power, establishing his eldest son as the sole, undisputed master of the monarchy's day-to-day operations. Camilla tried to break the silence, her voice tight as she asked whether this arrangement was merely a temporary measure to assist with the king's current workload. But Charles did not offer her a lifeline. He replied with a flat, unyielding tone, confirming that the transfer of authority was permanent, immediate, and backed by the full constitutional weight of his office. He made it abundantly clear that William was not acting as an assistant, but as the monarch's fully empowered deputy, holding final approval on all household matters without exception. As the realization washed over Camilla, her gaze darted to Princess Anne, who sat motionless, watching the queen consort with a steady, unreadable look that confirmed everything. This was not a sudden impulse by a tired husband. It was a carefully executed coup designed by the core of the royal family to reclaim control. The red folder resting in front of William contained the signed executive orders, prepared weeks in advance without Camilla's knowledge, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that she had been systematically locked out of the most important decision of Charles's reign. William did not smile, nor did he display any outward sign of victory. He understood that stepping into this role while his father was still alive was a heavy, dangerous burden that would invite intense scrutiny and deep personal bitterness. But as he looked at the documents bearing his father's signature, he knew there was no turning back. The era of dual commands and shadow influence was officially over, and the battle for the future of the British monarchy had just entered its most volatile chapter yet. The immediate aftermath of that room falling silent was where the real psychological warfare began. As the advisors filed out with their heads bowed, desperate to avoid eye contact with anyone wearing a crown, the atmosphere inside the palace shifted from formal tension to an outright cold war. Camilla did not wait for the door to click completely shut before demanding answers, following Charles into his private sitting room with an intensity that had staff clearing out of the corridors within seconds. She wanted to know how a decision of this magnitude, one that effectively demoted her standing within the operational hierarchy of the palace, could be drafted, signed, and delivered without a single word reaching her ears. For years, Camilla had operated under the assumption that her loyalty during the darkest public scandals of Charles's life had earned her an unshakable seat at the table where power was distributed. She believed that being queen consort meant her office was an equal partner in driving the monarchy's public image and internal strategy. But Charles stood his ground with a quiet, devastating calm that only made the revolution